for any of you that don't know about Citizen 7, here's our illustrious co-founder here, Greg Enos. We formed Citizen 7. It's not a organization. It is a movement, and it is committed to improving the city, deepening friendships from across racial lines, across ages, across zip codes, and helping people deepen their faith, but have an appreciation for leadership. And we have two fine leaders. So I'm not going to go into who these fine guys are. I'm going to let Mike just tell a little about Sam and how they met before he starts grilling. I think this is a roast, isn't it? Okay, Mike.
So he obviously doesn't know the rule about the last flyer at the microphone. I am not going to start roasting because I know what would happen. So good to see all of you. I'm Mike Smith. I think I've met most of you before. In fact, I was going to start teasing Sam. This is pretty impressive, by the way, this turnout. And it speaks volumes about Sam's character and what people who know him think of him and what people who don't know of him think about the chance to learn about him. You know, Sam, I did one of these 2 months ago. I think there are 50 folks here. For mine, 13 showed up. So I think we're in for a lot of fun. I'll do as I was asked. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sam, and then I'm going to ask him to set the record straight. Sam and I have known each other for at least 30 years. One of the first opportunities we had to get to know each other, Sam was Chief Operating Officer at IU Health, not IU Health at the time, but at IU Health as we know it. I was working in a 10 by 12 office with a metal desk and a phone at the behest of then Mayor Steve Goldsmith. Now, mind you, I had had my own trauma. I moved from a 2,400 square foot office with a fireplace and an attendant, and Goldsmith said, "Could you come down and help me?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "We can't pay you very much." I said, "That's okay." He said, "You won't have much of an office." And the phone rings, and it's Sam. I think he was laughing on the other end of the line because at that time I had come from the transportation industry, and I had agreed to help the city with mobility issues. Sam was thinking about mobility as moving clinical professionals from the med school to the hospital campus. My solution in those days was to buy a used van. Sam's solution was to build a damn monorail. I said, "Sam, you could hire a limousine to take those guys back and forth one at a time, cheaper than you could put that monorail up." He didn't like that humor. But since then, we've had times to laugh together, times to pray together, times to cry together. And it's been a wonderful friendship, a valuable asset in my life. And most recently, the last 10 years, we've really become closer through a shared opportunity to work on a project called Faith in Action. And our project leader is sitting right back here. Lindsay Rabinowitz brings Sam and me together often as we share a vision, which I'm going to have Sam tell you a lot more about, share a vision for lifting our city up, or making all people in our city uncomfortable with poverty. It's not okay to drive past it physically, spiritually, or intellectually. And he is my partner in that pursuit. Lindsay is our boss. She bosses us around, but it's allowed us to share a good deal more. Now, what I hope Sam will do is tell you about his youth, his family, his journey toward adulthood, and then take it right on into how in the world did such a nice guy end up in healthcare. Remember, I was paying him. I was the CFO at Anthem. He didn't get a dime unless I wrote him a check periodically. So he'll tell you how he got that dirty job.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It's I'm glad your memory's far better than mine. But thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing a little time with us. Mike and I think we resonate around the issue of faith in action because, for me, the number one issue in our community is poverty. It's the number of households and the number of children growing up in poverty. That's what creates the morning headline. That's what creates low educational achievement. That's what creates low health status. All the things that we say we don't like about the quality of life in our community, that's where it comes from. It comes from the number of children and the number of families we allow to exist in our community in poverty. And so Mike and I spent a lot of time trying to understand that and try to do something about it. But just a little bit about myself. I grew up here. I've been here pretty much for the last 76 years in Indianapolis. So I've seen a lot of the city and how it's evolved over time. I didn't grow up in a poor family. I mean, I was fortunate, and my parents had union jobs. And union jobs used to lift families out of poverty. That's how we got out of poverty, was from that. That's not the same case today. I grew up in a segregated Indianapolis, but it didn't matter because we had everything we needed. My parents had union jobs. We all had to work. We carried newspapers. We did other things, to help keep us in the middle class. But we had pretty much a middle class living. But I remember two of the most segregated memories I have. They happened every day, but the ones that stand out are Riverside Amusement Park. There used to be a Kings Island here in Indianapolis, but African-American brown families could not go there. It was for whites only. And there were signs up that said no colored allowed, But once a year, we got to go there because Western Electric, where my father worked, they bought out the park one day a year. And so we'd all get to go there for that one day. So we lived with segregation, and we lived with the remedies that corporate America tried to inflict on that at that time. The other thing is that we used to live in Hallville, which is thought of as a poor area. But again, because my family had the union jobs, they were able to move us to Riverside. That was where we bought our first home. And it was a beautiful home. I thought I'd move to Leave It to Beaver's neighborhood. Had our own room, grass in the yard instead of dirt, all of those things. But across the street, there was a double. And it said, for rent, no coloreds allowed. That was right across. So that's what we saw every day. But at the same time, because of the circumstance our parents put us in the circumstance at that time, it was a lot easier for us to ignore that, to go on with life, really do the things that were necessary to become good citizens. My mother was the biggest influence on all of us as far as community service. She helped found the Riverside Civic League. My mom cared about the community so much. She was the first person, I think, that went out and swept her own curbs. She had us out sweeping because she didn't wait for the city to come around and clean up the street. She was out there cleaning up the street. She was just one of those people. So that sort of instilled in me, sort of the community service, what's going on. My wife and I, Alexis, she's here tonight, but we've been really blessed, by circumstances, getting into healthcare, which was a very stable job. I was able to go to Methodist Hospital in 1981 and just had the opportunity to be there in the real growth of the medical sector. Mike kept paying us, but we kept growing. And so as the organization grew, I had the opportunity to grow with it. And it was, I always tell my wife I was never the sharpest pencil in the box, but I had a lot of smart people around me. And that's what allowed us to keep growing IU Health and create the wonderful health system that it is today. And I know a lot of people talk about the monorail, and Bill Loveday was the CEO at the time, and Bill said, we're going to build that monorail. He said, Sam, go build that monorail. And if you think about it, we were merging two competitors. Their whole genetic code was they were competing against each other. And so we had to merge them together and create one system. And so what we had to do was make it as easy as possible for them to get back and forth. And especially the medical students and the nursing students and all the students, to get them back and forth from the IU campus over to Methodist. Because one day we said, one day they will be the ones who will never remember the way it was. And so today we have one of the most powerful healthcare systems in America because of IU Health. And if we had stayed separated, we could have been an also-ran, but we would not have been the powerful health system that IU Health is today. So I still count it as a success and something that it lived out its 20 years, and it's been mothballed now, and probably appropriately so, since they've combined the hospitals, and they're all going to be there south of 16th Street, and so they don't have a need for the monorail after that. So that $4.5 billion construction project will hopefully open up in 2028 and be something we can all be proud of.
So we're going to ignore Donnie Palmer's idea of how the evening should flow, because Sam's just tripped a couple of switches that I think are timely for us to jump into. We had a chance to chat a little bit last night about this conversation, and Sam said, if we get into talking about our work together in poverty, please give me a chance to share with the group my vision, my view of the 7 essential assets and values that are required for one to attain self-reliance and escape poverty. Do you mind talking through that a little bit? And while you're at it, finish your chatting about healthcare. I worked for a payer. There are a number of very large payers in the country right now. No one ever imagined that they would grow to the size or the value that they have. But some would argue, and I confess my sins, by the way, to our Lord every day, and I confess that I struggle rethinking the value proposition of a payer. And I wonder, there aren't many as old in this room as you and I are. How many are Medicare age in here? Somebody put your hand up, even if you're not. The happiest health consumers in America right now, confirmed by surveys, are Medicare beneficiaries. Their experience when they secure service from a provider is much different from those who are insured by companies like the one I came from. So Sam and I talk about this. I lament from time to time our somewhat lame delivery on our mission, which was to improve the health of the members we serve. That's still on now Elevance's website. So Sam, share with this group what you think a simple solution would be. By the way, we don't watch much TV at our house unless there's a Colts game on or something like that. But last evening there was a great interview by one of Congress's leaders, an interview of him about what the impact would be if we went to a single payer system. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, we have created probably one of the most complicated funding systems for healthcare in this country that you've ever seen. It's kind of like Winston Churchill said about America. He said, they'll try everything else, but eventually they'll do the right thing. But we're probably still about 10 years away from doing the right thing. But basically, because we don't insure everyone, what happens is those of us who are insured subsidize the ones who are not insured. Because if you kind of walk around, we don't have people dying from heart attacks on the curb. We don't have babies born in very many at home who don't want to be born at home. So these things so people get health care, but unfortunately they don't get, health care at an early enough point to do it in the most economical way. So we give it to them in the most expensive way, and then we who are insured have to pay a higher price. Because if I'm at IU Health and I get 10% of my patients don't pay, I still have to pay the nurses and the doctors and buy the supplies and everything. So I've got to charge all the insured people more. So that really inflates the price of our healthcare system. So if we would get to the point where, if you look at most European countries, they spend about 30% per capita of what we spend. So we're spending 2/3 more. But at the same time, they're living longer, they're healthier than we are. But we're spending almost 3 times as much per person. But at the same time, our longevity is not longer, our health status is not better. Because what happens is, we have a lot of other factors that stress our lives and everything, and we don't get health care until we absolutely have to. And so I think that a single payer system is the best thing. The government should provide a basic health insurance for all of us. And then if you want a Cadillac plan, or just like you do a car, you want a Mercedes, you can buy up to a Mercedes. But everybody gets basic health care so that they can get preventative care, get the medications they need, insulin, those kinds of things that are going on. That's going to be the solution. I'm convinced that we'll get there eventually. But Indiana's not the worst state in the union. I would probably say Mississippi's probably the worst state in the union. But they're the least likely to have government-provided health insurance, too, because of politics. But at the same time, if you look, I recently did a project in Mississippi, and if you look at the amputation rate, that means people who lose a limb and it dies and they have to have it amputated to save their lives. It's 4 times higher in Mississippi than it is in the rest of the country because they have the highest percentage of people that are uninsured. They did not adopt Obamacare. They have a very weak Medicaid program. They have some commercial insurance and some Medicare, but there's so many people walking around uninsured, getting diabetes, poor diet. They don't get care. Their foot turns black. Their leg turns black. There's no choice to save their life but to amputate them. And so that's a microcosm of what's happening to us as a bigger country. So I don't know if that, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But the solution to poverty, and again, I did have another conversation with Notre Dame today, so we're trying to get Notre Dame to kind of help us to validate this. But I think in the 10 years, 9 years we've been doing Faith in Action, I believe there are 7 things that you need to sustain yourself out of poverty in a democratic, capitalistic society. If you're in a communist country or a socialist country, you wouldn't necessarily have that, because in Finland and France, everybody gets health care. Everybody gets a pension. Everybody gets a basic minimum wage. So if you're in a socialist country or a communist country, you don't have to have that. But in our society, a capitalistic democracy, you got to have 7 things. One is safe housing. You got to have a place to lay your head. I mean, if you don't have a safe place to live, everything about your life falls apart. That's what we see in people that are homeless and chronically homeless, in and out of homeless. You got to have a safe place to live, to sustain yourself. The other is basic nutrition. Our bodies are meant to be fed. And so you got to have a basic level of nutrition if you're going to be healthy. And it's got to be consistent. It can't be, I don't know where my next meal is going to come from, because then you see a lot of obese people who are really starving because they're overeating when they do have food because they don't know when they're going to get some more food. And they get into that pattern and then they become obese and we think, oh, they're getting too much to eat. No, they're just not getting food consistently so that they can live a healthy life. And then there is a minimum level of financial resources that you have to participate in a capitalistic democracy. I mean, you have to have internet access today. You have to have transportation to participate in the economy. You don't have the internet, you can't apply for a job now. If you can't have transportation, you can't get to the job. So you lose the job because you don't have transportation. So you got to have a minimum level of financial resources to clothe yourself, be able to represent yourself and present yourself for the employer. So you got to have that. The other thing is you got to have a basic health care. Basic health care, just like we talked about, but it's not so much is that we don't let people die on the street, but we don't make sure people get all the preventative care they need. We don't make sure that all the diabetics get the insulin they need, or all the people get the nutrients that they need if they're suffering from migraine headaches or other abnormalities that keep them from participating. So we got to make sure that you get your basic health care as well as your catastrophic health care. Right now, you can show up at the emergency room, you get taken care of. There's a law that says they got to take care of you, whether you can pay or not. But they don't have to give you drugs and they don't have to give you the medications you need. And that's what you need to sustain yourself and be regular at work, do the things that are necessary. And then Rouse Chetty was here the other day, and one that is a real secret ingredient is social capital. You got to have social capital. That means you've got to have people in your life that help you when bad things happen. All of us have situations where something bad happens in our life, and we either have a brother, a sister, a friend, somebody that we can talk to, and they talk us through it or they help us get over that hurdle. If you fall off the horse, they help you get back on the horse so that you can get back. That's social capital. But so many people trapped in poverty, they don't have any social capital. When they go into a problem, we aggregate them in geographic areas and subsidized housing altogether. So when something goes bad, who do they talk to? They talk to somebody else, and they're just as bad off as they are. So they can't help each other. But Ross Chetty said, if you could take people in poverty and help them develop relationships in more well-off neighborhoods, so they had relationships and conversations with people that were well-off, they developed social capital. And when they develop social capital, that gives them the strength, to deal with the things that happen in life that we all have. Probably the fifth thing is civic awareness. We all have to have a civic awareness that it's not just about us. We're part of a bigger microcosm, and our behavior matters, and we should behave in a way that helps us fit into the citizenship that we have responsibility for. That's why we don't steal each other's stuff. That's why we don't do illegal things. Maybe we speed a little bit, but we don't do big illegal things because we have civic capital, we have civic awareness. We know that we're part of a bigger thing and we want to make the bigger thing work out. But if you're entrapped in multi-generational poverty, there's no civic awareness. You don't believe it's ever going to get better. You don't believe the rules apply to you. So you start behaving in ways that are risky, cause problems, feed the criminal justice system, get into all other kind of risk behaviors. So when people lose their civic awareness, it makes it very difficult for them to get out of poverty. And then we need education for life. We have to be in a situation of lifelong education. Many of us get it because our parents have the resources and get us started in a good way. We get into the school and they make sure that we do well in school. Then we get education after high school as well. And then even when we get out and get our job, I used to tell people all the time, if I used the knowledge I got in college to get along in life today, I'd be a failure. You've got to have lifelong learning. It starts with preschool, then you got to have good quality K-12 education, then some education afterwards, and then you have to be in a situation where you're getting additional education so you don't become obsolete. And that's what happens to a lot of people. They get trapped into poverty because their skills are obsolete. And we don't need those skills anymore. So those are sort of the 7 things. And you know what? When you stop and think about it, you can think about, we do all of those. We spend millions of dollars doing all those. But we don't do them with fidelity. We've got a bunch of not-for-profits out there trying to do good things. But what happens is that the people in poverty get 3 or 4 of them. So all we're doing is keeping them comfortable in poverty. We don't make sure that they get all 7 of them because you have to have all 7 to thrive in a capitalist democratic culture. And if you stop and think about your own life, you've got those 7. You wouldn't be in this room if you didn't have those 7. Some of us get them by the grace of God. I got them because of my parents and because of mentors and other people that looked out for me, opened doors for me. But there are a lot of people in our community that do not get those 7 things with fidelity. If you look 40 years ago, and then you compare the number of children growing up in poverty in Marion County from 40 years ago to today, there are more children growing up in poverty today in Marion County. And that's where you get the morning headline. That's where you get all these quality metrics that we don't like because we allow children to stay in poverty for too long without getting those 7 things.
Just a little profound, just a little bit. Sam, we've not talked about another chapter of your career that I think this group would enjoy. You, after retirement, became involved with the Bose public policy team, and you're working very actively in that space. So I have a couple of questions. These are not to bait you at all, but they're to try to bring out some more conversation about education and about our faith. We have been taught to take care of the least among us. That is our calling. And yet when we look at some of our public policies, we should see an equal sign with a hash mark through it. Just this past week again, I read and watched public leaders decry the housing first model. You and I spend a lot of time in that space. I'd like for you to lean in a little bit on public policy and maybe on an anonymous basis, the work you've been engaged with and the extent to which it gives you a little ping once in a while on the side when you say, this is going down a path that actually contradicts my faith, contradicts some of my values. I'm walking against a conflict. And if you don't have one of mine, I'll give you one in a minute. But I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think that some days I'm a Republican, some days I'm a Democrat. My wife will tell you she's even accused me of being a Trumper on certain days. But I do try to go down the middle of the road because I do believe that government gets into things that they shouldn't be getting into. That the government's too big. We shouldn't be trying to do all the things that we're trying to do. But at the same time, recently there was a Trump, administration. They pulled back on what's called Gear Up, which some of you may know about. But it's a program that's supposed to help. I think it was in Indiana. It was like 6,000 low-income children. Basically give them counseling and tutoring and everything to help them raise their academic achievement so they'd be ready for post high school and hopefully gear them onto a more successful life, building up that lifelong education and the other things that people in poverty, need. And so they basically cut the program off. I think Purdue was operating it. They were going to work with the public schools. It's going to be $39 million, to run that program this next year. And they said, no, we're cutting that out. Government shouldn't be doing that. And I said, well, okay, maybe the philanthropic community, maybe the local business community, maybe others are better equipped to do that. But then at the same time, on the other side, business people coming to the federal government who already, they're not in poverty, they're already participating in the capitalistic democracy, but then they come in and they say, oh, well, we have to have tax credits. We've got to have tax subsidies so that we can build a hotel, or we can build a soccer stadium, or we can build other things that make the wealthy even more wealthy. And I'm just saying that, well, if we're going to do this, we ought to do it on both sides. It should be a balance of how it's done. And that's what happens, I think, and it is happening in our country right now, is that we're investing more for the haves than we are for the have-nots. And that's why it's so difficult to get the housing first strategy going and some of the other things, because we're just not willing to do that big investment. And our friends at Kite, they're friends of mine, but I can't remember. I think it was $70 million to help subsidize building a hotel. The housing first strategy was only 50, but somehow that one won and the housing first is losing.
You need to be fair to my friend John Bear Kite. They did not end up doing the hotel. Somebody else did, I think. Yeah. So I share Alexis' view. I'm never sure if you're Trump or somebody else, but we'll work past that. Donnie, we've spent, I think we're ready. We may be able to help with some of the questions that come from the floor.
I'm going to start with one, and then I'll give all you a chance. You have a lot of mentees in the audience here, and every time I turn around, someone says, oh, Sam Odle's my mentor. What advice, what would you give to someone who is looking for a mentor, or if you are a mentor, what approach do you take? What questions do you ask? Why has that been something that you've been so effective at?
Geez, I don't know. I appreciate the comment, but I don't know how effective I am at it. I think my wife is my best mentor. And sometimes when people say, well, what would you tell your 25-year-old self or something like that? I've had people ask that. I would say, well, God meant for us to partner up and not walk this life alone. Be really careful about the partner you pick, because that's going to be a big determinant. Life's going to happen, and it's going to be up and it's going to be down. But boy, the partner you pick and the one that you have to go through those things with is going to be a real important decision that you make. So make it really carefully. The thing that I think, is that looking for a mentor, I think you have to be a good mentee too. So you got to think about what is it that you want to achieve in your career? What are your goals? What do you want to do? And being really thoughtful and clear about that, because then that will help. A lot of times I'll tell people, they'll talk to me and I'll say, well, I don't think I'm the best mentor for you, but I know somebody who is. And so if you can be real clear about what your goals are, what you want to do, the conversation you have might not be with the person who ends up being your mentor, but they'll help you find that right person. And we all need advisors and people to help us. At 76 years old, I still think of Mike as a mentor. I think of my other friends as mentors. You're going to need them throughout life because the things are changing so fast.
Hey, questions, Mike?
You two have a unique friendship, and it'd be great and helpful for us to learn about the genesis of that friendship and how you nurtured it, because you've been able to impact the community, I think, so much through that relationship.
I think it's easy to understand, and hopefully easy to appreciate. Friendships are based upon trust. They're based upon shared and commonly appreciated values. They're based upon experiences that can be shared in ways that might teach other. I'm going to tell you a story that if one of my friends were here, he would say, "Oh, please don't say that out loud." But Dick Craigie and Sam and I and a friend of Sam's, Victor Pasley, who's the president of a historically black college in Lincoln, Missouri. The four of us took a trip about 10 days ago. Sam's idea, by the way. We played a golf resort near Battle Creek, Michigan, between Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. Delightful time. My friend Dick is special. He has a big heart and a big mind, but he has not had some of the experiences that he was about to have. Two black men who were much better golfer, by the way, than the two white guys. They kicked our butt for 3 days, but it was the most inspiring, open, love fest conversation about our races, about what's in our core. It was poignant at times. I'll tell you a story. Prejudice has not left our country. After golf on the third day, we went for dinner at a restaurant near the resort. Sam and Vic were the only people of color in the place. It was obvious to everyone. And during the course of the evening, we heard sirens, convergence of emergency vehicles and law enforcement. A man had been killed just outside our dining room window, tried to cross the highway and got hit by a car. And as we left, one of the young servers said, "You guys be careful going home." Vic and I picked up on what she was saying. We were in a place, and we were in Sam's car, and we had been drinking. And I said to Sam, "I'll drive us home." He didn't know what I was thinking. Vic knew what I was thinking. It was the wrong night for a black man to be driving out of that restaurant to cross the street. The fact is, neither one of us had to say a word to each other. We knew instantly this was about love and caring for each other. So these are the things done. This is one of several experiences. The other is much happier. Our friendship was defined over a course of social engagements when Alexis and Sam's beautiful daughter Montgomery were in our home, and the love could be felt around the dining room table. Gummy thinks I was competing to be her stepfather, I think. So I've talked to that girl 7/24 if she wants to talk. But those shared experiences define a natural and important friendship.
Yeah, I think that the one that maybe leaving that subject a little bit, but the one thing I'd leave you with, because I think it's really important, and I usually say this when I am talking to a majority white audience, but for black people in America, if you want to be successful, you have to have white allies. That's the reality of this country. And I've been blessed to find allies like Mike and others, but that's something that you have to be conscious of. But for white people to be successful, having black friends is a choice. You can have none, and you could do just as well in America as far as professional success. But I will tell you something, if you have black and brown friends, your life's going to be a lot more interesting. You're going to have a lot more fun. So that's the reason to do it. But remember that whenever you get approached or something, and you think about the friend that you're being to somebody of another race, remember, is they need your allyship, but your life's going to be a lot better and a higher quality if you have their allyship.
Some of the young people, we're just thrilled that some of you younger folk are here. How about a question from what do you guys?
Hi, my name is Noble. I just recently graduated with a computer science degree from Purdue, and appreciate it, thank you. One question that I've always been asking myself is, with technology rising such as AI, do you have any insight for how someone in the tech industry could help serve the community?
Well, I think I'm one of the least tech-savvy people. My wife will tell you, sometimes I can't even make the TV work, and I get my daughter on the phone and tell me how to do that. My wife does all the chat GPT stuff and everything. But I think that, to get started, I always tell young people, build your network. It's about the people you know and the people who know you. And don't ever stop building that network, because that will improve the quality of your life so much, create more opportunities for you. So I'd say, take your degree, get involved in a community center, in a senior program, or an after-school program or something, and help impart your knowledge to other people. Serve first. If you serve first, you will be served. You will meet people, you'll develop relationships, that all kinds of opportunities will come your way. So think about how you can use your degree to help those people who are not as well off, as well educated as you are.
I want to add a comment. Covet and steward the talent you have. Part of our challenge, all of us, is holding discipline to make informed decisions. We've got a country that's wanting to reach conclusions and make important decisions, maybe with half the information they need. So my encouragement to you is understand the value you can bring as you accumulate and manage data into an actionable set of observations and recommendations. Most of us in this room do not have the skill to gather data from diverse sources and bring them to bear in decision making. I think we would all be better served, frankly, to throw away these phones and look to young leaders like you who can bring to bear useful, accurate data from which we can all make form judgments and make decisions. So hold on to that as a very special skill.
Young man. We got to elevate ND, young man. Who is this? Vatican Radio Bills, 80s, Luke's. Eddie Brown's a thought.
Thank you, guys. My name is Jackson Barker, and I go to Arsenal Tech High School, and I'm a junior. And the question that I have for you guys is, with all the distractions that there can be in life, how do you guys stay locked in on your faith and what you guys believe in, even if everyone around you doesn't? And I know that surrounding yourself with good people is the start of that, but even when you have that, there's still some leeway for negativity to slip in. So how you guys stand firm on what you guys believe in?
Strong question. Let's give this to Sam first. Mike does tend to talk a little. I guess Sam does too.
The thing about it is we're definitely not above flaws. I mean, so we're not sitting there because we're above flaws. You want to know about mine? You just ask my wife, Alexa. She'll tell you in a minute. But I remember something recently. I saw Jeff's podcast, I think, or one of your sermons, where he talked about, okay, you spend all your time on CNN and CBS and watching all these news to figure out what's going on in the world, looking at your phone and everything. He said, we need to spend more time in the good book. We need to spend time, really reading our Bible, whatever source of meditation you use or whatever, but make sure you're spending enough time with that, so that you're not just distracted completely by the world. You do have to pay attention to what's going on around you, but make sure you're taking care of your spirit by staying at whatever faith organization you belong to, whatever faith you have, or whatever you use. Spend time with that every day, because if you don't, you do get sort of wore down and distracted, and negative thoughts start coming in, and negative thoughts start dominating your life and criticizing everybody you think is wrong and spending all your energy on that versus spending time with God and reflecting on how you're going to change yourself to be more receptive of God's blessings, because we all have them.
I think that's perfectly said. Tim, you've had your hand up for a few minutes. Do you have a question?
Sure. Sam, you started by talking about plates in Riverside, and I'm curious if you have visions to the future of Riverside or specific interventions that you long to see in your old company.
Yeah. I hopefully, we will see a resurgence of affordable housing and people moving back into Marion County. If you look at 30 years ago, I think the Marion County population was probably 800,000. But now, if you look at 6 o'clock in the evening, it's probably less than 300,000. Whenever I see people, I always say, hey, move back, become an urban pioneer, come back, make an investment in home and place. And I think there's good opportunities to live in neighborhoods like Riverside, as well as, other places. Downtown's great, but our neighborhoods, I think are ready for a rebirth. And if you remember, I mean, it has happened, because if you remember the area that's 21st and New Jersey, everything from 21st Street downtown, east of Meridian Street, used to be called Dodge City 30 years ago. Yeah. And now, it's about a rebirth and people coming back and moving back in there. When I drive up Delaware and College, the Heron Morton area, all those, well, that same rebirth, I think, can happen in Riverside and some of our other neighborhoods. And hopefully we'll see young people with a high price of housing. They'll see that, hey, this would be a good investment to come back here, buy this home and fix it up and become part of a neighborhood.
Al?
I don't know about you, Mike. Okay. I mean, I'm very glad to coach.
Just so you know, Al London just is the president of a new bank, Generations Bank, for the unbanked. Great story and a great leader.
Oh, thanks for that plug. We live in a time where it's a lot of uncertainty. And last week I did a lot of traveling, and I've learned over life to just sit back and observe. And as I was traveling through the airports, I just looked at people, and you could say I was judging, so forgive me later, but it just looks like people have a lot of pressure. Like everyone's walking around real tense. And so last night I got in front of a group, so I'm going to ask you the same question that was asked of me. What advice would you give us in this uncertain times? There's a lot of pressures. How do we take this pressure moment and turn it into a place of power so we don't give up, so we can stay focused? So if you think about the moments in your life where you've had the most pressure, how did you turn that into a place of power?
I said, I told Sam earlier that there are a few things that need to be said. And 56 years of marriage, Sue would say the rules have changed often. I would say maybe not. One set of rules has never changed. And it's in response to your question. We find it helpful to commit to 3 fundamental premises. Unconditional love. That means not just in our marriage, but in our life. Unconditional love. No judging. There's only one judge. We know that. No judging. And then a commitment to be there and to meet you where you are and to be there for you. And we have found the more we talk about that, the more we think about that, relationships with friends. I have a cute story I could tell you about that in a little bit. Dick Craigie's girlfriend, after when the girls leave and we have a couple of beers, I'll fill you in with that. But we find applying those standards to be really, really helpful, and also to drain us of the negative energy that creates that tension. We just don't allow that negative energy to take us over.
I'd say ditto. You know, that's the thing that we have to do, you know, is to keep going back to whether it's the scriptures or whatever faith you have and doing that. And then the other thing is, you know, is making sure you spend enough time with family and friends, you know, and those things that give you positive energy. Because we can get busy in our careers and our work and driving that, and then hearing all the negative, whether it's politics or whatever, and we lose sight of the positive things that are happening in life. And I think there are a lot of them. Recently was at the 100 Black Men breakfast, and that some of you were there. Craig was there. I mean, it was just inspiring, the things that are happening, but they don't make the TV news. They're not going to make the news. So we have to kind of look for those things and make sure that we're balancing our life and what we see and what we experience.
Sir. Yeah, just a question of just about both of you guys are, you know, have had successful careers, are highly respected. And it's kind of to piggyback what Brother London said. How do you stay grounded? You know, there's a lot of young people in the room, and what keeps you humble?
The question is, are they humble? But
My wife. But I think that I think if you're going to be successful, you're going to have a lot of self-reflection. You know, I mean, the successful leaders, I used to tell people all the time, you know, when you get a job, you know, you get selected. You didn't earn that job. You earn that job every day you come to work. That's what keeps you humble. Like I got to do a better job tomorrow than I did today. And my wife will tell you sometimes I don't do it at home, but I try to make sure, you know, that as you get older and a little bit wiser, you know, you're as Mike said, you know, you're a lot more patient, a lot less judgmental, and just try to let everybody have their space, and you try to be there to be supportive of them in their space, and that will keep you humble.
I agree. I talk too much. I think Sam is all over it. And for me, reflection and prayer are the key to staying grounded. About the time I think I know it all, I just need a little bit of time with God, and then I realize I don't.
This question is for both of you. What's the most impactful initiative each of you have accomplished, and how did it impact how you served others?
Real quickly, a lesson I learned in service. Governor Daniels had asked me to get involved with the Higher Ed Commission. And in that process, I learned more about our community college system and its worth and the value that it adds to many young lives. And Sue and I found an opportunity to work with an accelerated degree program that was created by the commission. We tried it in Lafayette. 250 youth were recruited. These were young people who had good grades, good attendance, apparently high aptitude, but had expressed no interest in post-secondary education. And that was because their life was getting in the way, poverty or otherwise. We made it possible for those children to get associate degrees in 10 months with no debt and full articulation to baccalaureate granting universities. It's the most satisfying undertaking our families ever had. 250 youth went on to college, no debt, and their completion rate was north of 85%. And we were very proud of that.
Well, I think, you know, my career in healthcare, you know, is probably, I think, you know, my greatest contribution. Every day, you know, the psychic income, knowing that you're helping people at their lowest moment. Even though I wasn't doing the surgery, I was making sure the surgeon could do the surgery and have the resources they needed. And the other thing is, you know, providing the healthcare, but then providing 24,000 people with jobs, you know, that were good paying jobs that they could take care of their families. So stewarding a healthcare organization, you know, was always a source of pride. And and something that, you know, I was really proud of. My time on the IPS school board was also gratifying too. IPS had the same school board for, I think, 30 years, and it was going downhill real fast. And so a number of us jumped in and said, hey, we've got to turn around the public school system. So we're able to get elected to the school board, hire a new superintendent, create a whole different model of schools in IPS. And even though there's still challenges because 70% of the population of IPS are kids in poverty, but at the same time, I think the school system's on the right track and moving ahead. And then I have to say, you know, that probably, you know, my wife found me, and that was my greatest achievement. So thank you, dear.
I agree. Wow. Two related questions, and in all seriousness, not a political statement. I think we have a crisis of civic leadership, and I would love to hear what you think should be done about that. And I'm not kidding about this. I am genuinely curious. Sam, why would you not run for mayor?
Yeah. But I really think it needs somebody younger. I'm 76 years old now. I don't think you need a 76-year-old mayor any more than you need an 80-year-old president. But I do believe that the crisis of civic, you know, crisis is we've got to get younger people involved and get them back in the system. There are too many 25 to 30-year-olds who just have checked out. They just don't believe the political system contributes anything positive to their lives. So they don't vote, and what we end up with is we end up with the government we deserve, which is a very polarized kind of government that really doesn't give us the best results that we need. And then a lot of times what happens is we get people who are not the best qualified, but we get the people who are the ones who are willing to get out there and do it. So I think the crisis is getting all of us to get back to the polls, get involved, elect people who are bipartisan, who want to build the kind of community you want to have, and really talk to those candidates and find out who wants to really build a community I want to live in versus somebody who declares themselves to be right or left, and then really get involved. But I think my day for running for office is over.
Well, there is such a thing as a draft. I think a genuine, open, honest convening of our young folks is essential. The faces I'm seeing in this room, a simple teaser is, where would you look to see in writing what identifies our aspiration for Indianapolis? Who could tell me where they would find it in writing or have heard it recently that we have a consensus view about Indianapolis? I find that just frightening. Bill Hudnut and Dick Lugar and Steve Goldsmith and Bart Peterson made rather clear to our community what their priorities were and what they thought the image of the city could and should be. That's not to take anything away from Greg Ballard or the people who worked with him, but I would just say to you, it's been 2 decades since you could say to a stranger, what does my city really stand for? What does it hope to be? What are the 2 sentences that you would tell a stranger on an airplane? Here's what Indianapolis is all about. We simply do not have a theme or a shared vision for the city. And that will only happen as there's a convening and coming together of thoughts and dreams and aspirations.
Hey, we got time for one more question. Any more questions?
So I think my question is, I see you, Sam, I see you, Mike, Don, Greg, Steve. You guys had an intentionality to build the city that you want, right? And I think that younger folks are finding it difficult to collate together and have the same thing you guys had 30 years ago or 40 years ago. You know, what is the encouragement that you guys have to be able to say to younger folks, this is how you do it in terms of coming together to kind of have a vision for what the city should be?
It's simple. What you need are 9 grandchildren, and I could loan you a few of them if you need it.
Well, I think it's just getting involved. You know, I think we got to get out of our homes. We got to get out of our cocoon. We got to get out there and say, hey, look, you know, there's going to be there's going to be midterm elections. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to find out. What's Indiana Citizen? Indiana Citizen, Bill Morrow's not-for-profit. Everybody running for office is going to be on that site. And you can read their positions on things or whatever. Find somebody on there you want to support. Get involved in the political process. It really is easier today in some ways because of technology. But I would say go to Indiana Citizen, find a race that you care about, whether it's the mayor or your state representative or your state senator or whatever. Get involved in doing that. Your city councilors are going to be running again for office. Just figure out who's your city councilor. I'm going to find out, whether I'm going to support the incumbent or am I going to support somebody who's challenging them because they got better ideas. So get involved in the political process. I think we've let politics become sort of dirty, and too difficult. And I think we got to jump back in and take control of the political system again and start electing people who really want to build something and have a vision, as Mike said.
In answer, like with Greg and I, number one, we're building social capital in Citizen 7. I mean, make no mistake about it, that purpose and intention. The reason why Mike and I do things and make things happen philanthropically is because we have a relationship, and that built trust. You can't have trust unless you have a relationship. To have a relationship, you got to show up, right? Al and I never knew each other before. We hung out at Lake Lemon for X number of hours. In other words, it takes some commitment. Greg Kinchin came from 100 Black Men, came to Fishers to Spoke Note. All of a sudden, he bridged to Bill. He stepped on the other side and said, I'm taking the first step. And I think in many instances, we have to take that first step. All right, where's A.T. Simpson? Is he still here? A.T. and I just had coffee yesterday. We were talking about how we changed the city. His passion, he's on the KIP board, but is to have impact through exposure. How do you do this? We're gonna have a brainstorming session and a whiteboard. We're gonna try to do some things, and I have no idea whether they'll work. Same kind of thing. We had a group of great guys under 35. 24 sharp men showed up, and we said, the question is, if we're sitting here 3 years from now, what has to have happened in this city and with this fellowship for you to be happy about its progress? And I'm telling you, the energy around that room. And then I said, okay, and those things, then prioritize them. And they were like fighting like cats and dogs, right? I said, right here, guys, this is the process. You have to wrestle with what are we going to do, what needs to be done, what's most important, and what can we get behind and tackle. We may not be able to do a lot, but we can do a little. And we're going to give these guys a budget, make them raise a little bit of money, and say, you know what, here's the money. You go do it and let us know. We'll be your coach, and we're going to coach you on a monthly basis. But because in many instances, our generation has not gotten out of the way. We need to hand the baton and say, and I'm here if you happen to drop it. I'll be glad to talk to you about where I've dropped it and maybe something you might do. But I think in some instances, we have to commit to, if we never set the goal of having a better city, if we never set the goal of building social capital, not for the people in this room, how about for the urban youth? And what's some practical ways to do that? And let's do some things. They don't need to probably know the 76 and 71-year-olds, but they might need to know the 30 and 35-year-olds that are working in places, and all of a sudden they become built into their lives. So you got me going on that, but I think that we're going to, a buddy of mine, he was trying to build 100,000 churches in northern India. He's helped build 38,000. And he says in a movement, you go after something really big, and you normally have youth because they have the energy. And he said he hopes on his tombstone that it says, whether he's going to get to 100,000 or not, at least he tried. And that's my hope for Citizen 7. Hey, no idea whether our experiment will work well, but at least they tried. Thank you all. Let's give these guys a big round of applause.
Thank you all for being here. Let's give Lori Heath a big round of applause, our administrator who made all this happen. And thank you all very much. We have Mitch Daniels coming for Citizen 7. You're all welcome. November 4th on a meetup. So come and see Mitch.